In this course, we're hopefully helping Corbin and yourself to cross the bridge from the cosier environment, in a way, of family and school and university into the fantastic world of business and work. And this is really the adult life that you are going to have to learn how to optimize. So it's really important, if possible, for you at this stage to get an understanding of how business people think and also how they use business maths to do calculations, because it's quite different from the sort of calculations and sums and statistics and goodness knows what all else people will have taught you at school. Business doesn't work like that. Business is all about purpose, being fast, only knowing as much as you need to know in the moment in order to take the appropriate action and behave in the right way. And that's what this part 6 of session 2, particularly focuses on: how to think in the right way and how to do sums in the right way. You will see that we use things like statistics and examples and all that sort of thing. Bottom line is, this session, it's not about Stanford at all. It's about how to think and how to use business maths. And by the way, just so you don't get the wrong impression, if you are lucky enough to be able to do an MBA at Stanford, then that is in effect a golden ticket for the rest of your life, because the whole thing is just the most amazing experience, and it may be expensive, but in the context of wages in the Silicon Valley environment, the cost is probably equivalent to 1 year's wages for a business manager or a team leader in the Silicon Valley environment. At the moment, those companies are called FANGs, which is Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. But by the time you're watching this, they could be completely different companies. The bottom line is the cost has to be seen in the context of the return on investment, how much doing that is going to be of value to you later on. And I cannot stress strongly enough, if the ROI on doing a Stanford MBA is probably the best educational ROI you could possibly get. So we actually talked about drilling down and time and staying in the time focus. If it's about time, we talked about estimating, broad estimates, choosing the right word for to accompany to what's called qualifier number, qualify and quantify. So, okay, how long? 2 years. Brilliant. Now listen.
Yeah.
At this stage of the game, every word you say almost is a learning opportunity, because we have to. What we're doing is giving you the education you've missed over 14 years. I think we established.
However long it's been.
Yeah. And had you been given this education, had you been given this sensitivity early on in your academic life, you would have been able to use it. And that's one of the things that you get at a very high-priced, fee-paying school, like Eton or Harrow or whatever. They do bring all this stuff in pretty early.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like that, just for general interest. This is a bit of a rat hole, but rat holes are okay. It's like that because there's a tradition of learning Latin in European schools until 150 years ago, maybe. Everybody who'd been well educated learned Latin and Greek. And as well as being able to talk to each other in Latin, which not many people did, but in order to speak Latin, you have to analyse every word you say and its tense and so on, because the endings change depending on how you're using a word. So if you're ordering someone, go to the shop in Latin, you may use a particular voice for go to the shop. Okay?
Yeah.
And that would be called the imperative. Whereas go to the shop
Yeah.
would be questioning, perhaps, or suggesting, and so on. And so there's probably at least 6 different endings for go to the shop.
For the same thing.
For the same
totally
thing.
different things.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also within go to the shop, they'll have different endings for go to the shop now, go to the shop soon,
Yeah.
or go to the shop one day.
Yeah. At
All
some
right?
point in the future. Yeah.
Yes. And so the few words that mean go, I'm not going to give you Latin for it, but
Yeah.
if you're trying to speak Latin and say go to the shop, you have to put the appropriate endings on to what you mean.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a fantastic discipline for people to learn. It's extremely hard, but it raises your consciousness.
Yeah. Of what you're actually saying.
Yes.
All the time. Yeah.
Yes. And again, it comes back to not just the meaning of every word, but the way in which you're using that word. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's all died out. It's been killed off in the last probably 60, 70 years. I learned Latin at school, as you'd expect.
Mm-hmm.
My father learned Latin and Greek, even though he left school at 15. He'd learned Latin and Greek and some other languages as well. How did I get there? Now you bring me back to the subject. Where are we at? What are we talking about?
So we just went down the layers, realised how many days a year you get at Stanford Business School.
Okay. So you're now going to give me another piece of information, which is what? Or are you?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to talk about, when we were talking, I tried to go down a layer earlier into what you do in each term, when I misunderstood the fact that we were channeling on the time.
Okay, so is that what you'd like to cover next, the what?
Well,
or how much?
Let's do the how much, because the how much ties in quite nicely with the figures that we just got.
That's good. So what you're talking about is the thread.
Yes.
Control of conversation flow is another important soft skill that you can easily observe and practice yourself. Think about how you can keep a listener's interest by using links to maintain a storyline. Humans naturally communicate through stories. It's a fundamental aspect of social intelligence. I've noticed it especially in Africa. It's a part of rhetoric, the soft skill called rhetoric, and if you can take a class in that, possibly while you're still at university or at night school or something, and practice debate or oratory or even amateur dramatics, you'll have a huge mental advantage because your subconscious mind will learn to adapt the way it presents words and sentences to your conscious mind and hence to how you speak. And eloquence is a very important part of social intelligence. Now, again, if you watch TV, and they nearly always have 2 presenters on daytime TV, well, not daytime, on TV
Whatever
generally. The reason they have the 2 presenters there, as well as being usually a man and a woman or whatever, to break up the whole process and make it not so much ego-driven, but they link across to each other
and keep it flowing.
Yes, but also, especially there's a show called The One Show, and that just goes everywhere. It links across.
Yeah.
It's almost like talking about frogs. Here's Gordon dressed in green. He looks like a frog. Or talking about frogs. Here's Gordon. Oh, he's dressed in green. They won't make it as obvious. Just the same colour as frog. So it's usually try and bring some subtlety into the links and make them invisible, and that's what makes for entertaining thing. It's good speaking as well. It's good conversational skill to link one thing to another. Okay, but I'd like to talk about linking.
So speaking of 120 days a year, the average cost.
How much?
For Stanford Business School was $120,000. Sorry.
A calculator. a year?
Yeah. Cheapest was 112,000. Most expensive was 132,000.
So an average.
Yeah.
Is that an average you've worked out or an average that you read?
No, an average that I just worked out in my head.
Okay, so you decided to take 100 and... What was the lower figure?
12.
112. And the higher figure was?
132.
132. In the next few minutes, I'm going to contrast the different styles of using school maths, which is slow and deliberate and exact, and purposeful business maths, which is as fast as you can make it, and also trying to find what's really important, what will have impact, why are you doing the calculation in the first place. So if we were being pedantic...
Then it's not quite what I said, but it's...
So we've got 4, 4, 2, 4, 4, divided by 2, it's 122.
Mm-hmm.
So
well, it's going to be halfway between these 2 points, isn't it?
Yeah, and you chose to go for 120.
Well, I had made the link with our 120 days, and I'd seen that we were similar to that 110 or 110, sorry, and 130. The halfway point within those two, I rounded them, was 120, which was the same figure as our.
So this is $120,000.
Yes.
Every year?
Yeah.
When you get an answer to a purposeful conversation, it should have both meaning and feeling. And I'm trying to coach Corbin here to not just coming up with an answer, but using that answer to communicate his thoughts on the significance of the answer that he has found. So you will see me change my tone and also encourage Corbin to talk to camera about the answer that he has found. I must admit it takes him a little while to start really projecting the significance of the answers, but he's going to get there. So how much is that a day?
Well, the reason I made that, the rounding estimate, was so that we could have $1,000 a day quite nicely.
Tell the camera.
$1,000 a day.
For what?
For a day at Stanford Business School.
Tell the camera.
That's actually that is the days in education. This price that I found was the total price for a year, and they also gave you accommodation for your first year. So this
it includes
accommodation
for year one.
On the campus.
Is the price for year 2 the same?
I didn't see, but I think it is the same. Yes.
So it may or may not be the same.
Yes, I'm pretty sure it is. But
okay, all right. So that's well, let me just say, the reason I enjoy working with you and the reason I've chosen you to be the the student is you're showing those kinds of initiatives. You're not pedantically doing the little sum that adds 132 and 112 as the range of prices and then adding them up and getting the average. In statistics, there are many different types of average, by the way.
Yeah, so, I've done a lot of that for 14 years.
Yeah.
It wasn't so much that it's going to sound pedantic myself, but I didn't miss that calculation. I noticed the figures and saw how we could get a slightly less accurate but more understandable number from making a rounding.
Which is terrific.
Estimate.
This past 15 minutes or so has been about raising Corbin's and hopefully your own awareness of calculations, listening to people talking, storyline, linking, and all sorts of things like that. So it's a good time now to write down in your life book something you can read, something you can watch, and something you can do in order to make your progress happen. Because if you don't write things down, these videos are not entertainment. They are a practical coaching guide. So really, it's totally up to you what value you get out of them, but potentially even just this last video can help you become aware and think in a completely different, more purposeful way.